Now, the first batches of emergency fodder are arriving from the UK this morning as farmers deal with a cattle feeding crisis. Months of wet weather means many farmers have now run out of feed for livestock and must turn to the open market to try and boost their reserves. Joining me with that story and everything else this morning are Michael Regan from the Irish Times and Director of the Irish Academy for Public Relations, Ellen Gunning. Good morning to you both. So the Minister for Agriculture, Michael Creed, came out yesterday and said, yes, we are actually going to start importing fodder now for farmers who need to supplement existing supplies or perhaps have no reserves left whatsoever. Many farmers saying this morning this is too little, too late, particularly farmers, I think, in the northwest and west of the country who have been facing this crisis since January of this year.
I was really surprised that Fianna Fáil's Charlie McConalogue said that he has been warning the Minister about this since September of last year. And just wearing my business hat, I thought, if in September of last year farmers knew that this was going to be an issue, then why are we suddenly looking at it in April of the following year? Something should have been done in September of last year if they knew that this crisis was coming. That's the first thing.
Now, when you say something should have been done, the co-ops, the IFA, the Minister...
By any and all. The interesting thing about the Minister being involved is this is the second time in 5 or 6 years that the government has got involved and said, OK, I think in 2013 what they did was they sponsored the travel arrangements. So they sponsored moving fodder from one area to another. And this time they're saying they'll actually partly sponsor the fodder. I think it's a bigger issue than that. I think if the weather has been appalling, there's no doubt about that. I've no doubt that there is a crisis. But this surely is climate change, so it's a longer-term problem. And if it's a longer-term problem, then you can't expect the government to keep coming in, or co-ops to keep coming in at the last minute and saying, here is a temporary solution. I think it needs a longer-term thinking.
Yeah, and the Minister did say, look, we have been monitoring this for a long period of time, but we weren't going to do anything almost until it got to crisis point, because we weren't going to bring in fodder 6 weeks ago in case the weather suddenly improved and we didn't need it. So there was a bit of a difficult situation for them to be in.
There is a bit, but I think what it needs is maybe more liaison between the Minister and the agricultural bodies, so that the bodies or the co-ops or the farmers groups can say, these are the plans that we have in place and this is what we would need the government to do in the event that it does become a bigger crisis than we anticipate. But I think at the first level it needs the farmers and the farm organisations to put structures in place that will prevent this happening on a year-by-year basis.
So that they don't suddenly have to react if there is a crisis. Now, I did hear some of the co-ops speaking yesterday and say, look, there were channels of transportation and importation in place that we did learn from 2013, so we were able to put it in place very, very quickly. So lessons have been learned. I wonder, Michael Regan, are the government and should the government be reluctant to intervene here to set a precedent, to offer support when weather is a factor? Because not only, I take it, are farmers suffering and the potential for livestock to go without food, but there were many businesses affected because of this bad weather, businesses that had to close for an extended period of time, who didn't take any money in through the door and still had to pay wages, and there was no support offered for them. So why are farmers treated differently?
Because I think the area where they work, as it were, is affected in the sense that the land is affected. Now, there was a great report in the TV3 News yesterday from the Martin Castle Island, where a number of farmers were interviewed about the crisis, and it is a crisis. And you can see from the television pictures the soggy land, the wet land, the cold. Now, there is a fodder crisis. The Minister is to announce full details later today. As we know, he met Tagisk and the co-ops yesterday. I think it was 3 million that the government came up with in 2013. But I'm not too sure that criticism of him not acting soon enough is fair, in the sense you can't predict. None of us were predicting this poor weather that we've had, you know. But there is a crisis, there's no doubt about it. And you can see it from the interviews with individual farmers and literally the television clips of soggy land.
Support should be offered to them.
I do, yeah.
Even though in Storm Emma, during Storm Emma, many businesses said, look, we've lost takings, we're under pressure because we couldn't open the business doors and we still had to pay our staff, and no support offered to them. That's
a fair point, that's a valid point, but if it comes to land, you're particularly affected by the weather.
Yes.
As distinct from a business that's run indoors. Now, that's not to take from the enormous pressure that was put on businesses during the snow we had and all that kind of thing.
OK, government coming under pressure this week because the teacher conferences are on and almost all of the unions looking for an end to this two-tier pay scale, so lower pay for teachers and indeed other public servants who started after 2011. Ellen, do they have a point? Do you think, are they right, teachers at this stage, to look for pay equalisation?
I think the issue, Finian McGrath said that this was a red line issue and that it was preventing the more teachers coming into the pool or coming into the industry. The teachers weren't being paid well. I think the issue is, are they being paid a fair rate for the job that they're doing? I don't think it's about pay equalisation. It's not so long since we all fell off the edge of a cliff and we had this massive economic downturn. People took huge cuts in their pay rates. They will probably never recover them. And if they recover them, they're really only coming back to where they were 10 years ago, which isn't exactly a recovery or an increase. I think one of the big difficulties the government has is that if you get to the stage, and I can completely understand it from both sides of view, but if you have been paid at a high rate when there was that economic Celtic tiger that we all lived through, you expect to continue to be paid at the same rate. But if you're coming in 10 years later and that tiger isn't running and you're trying not to get it fired again, you can't be expected to pay the same rates. I think the issue the government has is that they need to set a rate which is a fair rate for teachers' pay, which they believe they've set for the new teachers coming in, but which they'll never be able to equalise with the teachers who are there. And the other issue is that people in any industry, I don't think are entitled to the same rate because they're in the same business. Two teachers shouldn't be paid the same amount. Two teachers of equal qualification, maybe one has 10 years experience and one is new into the industry, are not necessarily going to be paid the same rate. So I think the issue is a really thorny one for government, but it's more about, is the pay rate fair than is it equal?
Well, it's about to get even thornier if Finian McGrath's comments, which are in the Irish Times this morning, actually ring true. He is saying this is a red line issue. He said teachers now deserve to be paid equally across the board, and when it comes to budget 2019, if they don't get it, what? A red line issue means we're out?
Absolutely. And Finian, of course, is a former teacher and is part of the independent science. Fianna Fáil flexing its muscles on this as well. This is getting very political. I warned the teachers about this, by the way. While Richard Bruton was telling them that they have a fair case, no money has been set aside. Now, they will talk about this. Now, when Pascal walks into the Dáil in October, he'll have 3.2 billion to play around with. Restoring the full pay to the public servants would cost 200 million.
Yes, it's not just teachers. It's
precisely, right across the full.
And of course, if you pay teachers, everybody else will look for it too, so you may as well just deal with it all in one go.
Let's be realistic about this. If the teachers are going to be paid, the other public servants will have to be paid. And, OK, 200 million out of 3.2 billion mightn't seem a lot, but when you have a health service in chaos, where you have a massive housing problem and where you have other lobby groups, I'd warn the teachers not to be too confident about this.
Oh, interesting. I just want to move very quickly to a story which has been around really for the last couple of years, but is really growing ahead of steam at the moment, which is the alleged data breach at INM. I think for some people it's quite difficult to understand what is going on and why it is important, why we should be following and taking an interest in this story. Michael, just give us the background quickly to this.
Basically, the allegation is, to put it very crudely, that I've been reading your emails, let's say, illegally.
You and I work in two different companies. I'm working away, and you have hired a third party to come in and for some reason take a look at my emails, and I know nothing about it.
I mean, the allegation,
that's the allegation.
The allegation is very clear. Data, including the names, by the way, of a number of journalists who work for the company research by a third-party company called Trusted Data Solutions. Now, a number of names have been mentioned of journalists: Sam Smith, Brendan O'Connor, very high-profile journalist on INM, Maeve Sheehan.
Indeed, a number of barristers.
And a number of barristers.
This list, this list of an affidavit which has been sent into the High Court because obviously they're now looking to get inspectors to come in and do proper investigation in INM.
We'll await the High Court decision on these inspectors, but potentially, and we have to stress, of course, these are allegations.
Absolutely.
Potentially, this is very serious.
Potentially very serious. I think it's a story we're going to be covering quite a lot here over the next couple of weeks. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Plenty more to come on Ireland AM. We'll be back after this short break.